We had Max on Twitter this week get in touch with us, and it's another Scandinavian themed mailbag. In light of Holger Rune's horrific injury in Stockholm and the public comments it sparked from Jack Draper saying, "We are pushing our bodies to do things they aren't supposed to do in elite sport. The tour and calendar have to adapt if any of us are going to achieve some sort of longevity. Do you think players need to take more accountability for how they choose to manage their schedule and their bodies?"
Mhm. Tasty one,
Yes.
Joel.
Interesting one. Yes. Yeah. So I mentioned this before the break, but yeah, a few comments coming out. And yeah, Jack Draper is probably the most eye-catching. Chris, I'm going to come to you
Mm.
first because yeah, there has been, of course, been a lot of kind of talk on the schedule, and yeah, is this a schedule thing or is this a player thing, and them needing to kind of look at it themselves and take action themselves as opposed to kind of just blaming what's kind of going on around them? Where do you stand?
Well, I think firstly, I believe everyone has agency and these players have agency. I mean, Novak Djokovic, you can't force him on a tennis court unless he wants to be
Mm,
there. And Casper said the same thing in press this week. He said, you don't go to jail if you don't play these tournaments. Sure, you might get fines. If you don't play the 500 quota, you won't get the bonus pool either. There are certain consequences, but you're in the business to win Grand Slams and to make history in tennis. So that's what you should be focusing on. A lot of the rest of it is just noise. So in terms of these comments, I think it's probably broader than just, Holger's injury. Shanghai, that was not great for players, those conditions. I did not like seeing that. And I have a lot of sympathy and
mm,
empathy for that. If you are a competitive player, you want to play your best and you can't in the conditions you've been given. I do think though, with Holger it was a bit different, wasn't it, Alina? Because he did have that injury that he picked up the day before and then he played. And I don't know if it is connected, but it felt like if you have an injury, you might not play the same way, and then you put yourself more at risk of another injury. Whereas if you didn't play, you probably wouldn't have necessarily had that injury.
Yeah, exactly. It's decisions, it's advice as well. In the end, where's that coming from? Now the players are surrounded by very, I feel like, short-term advice and short-term visions from coaches, from agents, from, I don't know, federation reps, and
Mm.
everybody has like a short-term goal. And you want to maximize exposure, you want to maximize um, I don't know,
Money. Yeah.
tuition fees and visibility and points and everything that might increase that paycheck. So are they getting the correct advice when
mm.
it comes to the calendar, when it comes to
Mm.
making those decisions that might tip
Yeah, I
in their
mean,
favor?
did Holger get greedy? Is my question. What
We were
should
very much in doubt that he's actually going to play, seeing him limping and having a hard time serving.
So he put himself at risk, is what we're saying, in many ways. And I think that's something where if you are, at Jack Draper's level, Joel, do you think
Mm.
that he's someone who is at the most suffering from this in terms of the fact that he can't choose where he wants to play? I mean, has he played a full season to say the schedule's too long?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was, I guess, a little bit surprising, coming from him, given his, I guess, his situation at the moment. But I think it comes down to being able to adapt. And if you're kind of fully fit for the season, I don't think it was like 10 years ago where you could play a full season and, that feel manageable. I
Mm,
think the schedule has got so ridiculous and uh, heavy that players are failing to adapt, I think, to these changing circumstances around them. And I wonder, with Holger Rune, I do sympathise with him because to me, he's a player who loves playing tennis,
mm,
almost probably loves playing tennis too much. And he's one of these players who just plays, to me, just plays so many tournaments. And I think, nature of kind of probabilities is the more tennis you play, the more likely maybe you're going to
mm.
be putting yourself at risk. So I think it's a very kind of stern warning maybe to the rest of the locker field that to the locker room even that players need to adapt regardless of if they're going to get fined or not. They've got to look after themselves, and you can't just kind of keep going on and just having this kind of never-ending maybe
Hamster
tour this
wheel.
cycle, because working hurt, playing injured, that's not the way I think to do it. I think the way to do it is, like Novak Djokovic, and kind of maybe be a bit more pick and choose. Now, I understand Novak Djokovic is in a completely different position. He's won everything imaginable and he just wants to focus on the Grand Slams. But I do think we're getting to a point once again where, we saw that kind of pick and choose strategy with older players who might want to kind of balance it out with their families, or, they've been there, done that on the tour, and they just want to choose their tournaments. But again, I think we're seeing it hit the kind of the younger guys on the tour, and it's something again that everyone I think is going to need to do in terms of adapting to what feels comfortable to them, so that they don't kind of put themselves at risk, because it just feels like at the moment a lot of players feel obligated to play when they're not 100%, and putting themselves in these situations where ultimately the worst thing could happen, as we've seen in Holger Rune's case, and no one wants to see that. No fans want to also see, I think, tennis players playing at 70%, on the tour. Absolutely, exhibitions, fine by me, but we want to see them at 100%. And if the schedule isn't going to get kind of minimized or shrunk, and that's not going to happen anytime soon, then they need to go and adapt and talk to their team. And as you said, Alina, think about the advice that they're getting and actually take a step back and look at their schedule, I think, a little bit more.
I think it is a time where everyone is talking about this. And I think it's what Djokovic said. If you do want to make a change, you've got to be vocal on it, but you've also got to stick to it. He's made it clear he's not going to play all these tournaments. He's going to play the ones that he wants to play. And I think that's, again, a luxury he has. I think it helps other players who wouldn't necessarily get into these tournaments if they weren't 2 weeks, some of these 2 week masters. So it's not just the top players saying they're suffering. I think actually it's giving opportunities to other players, we've seen in Shanghai, we had a lucky loser who got in because some of these players had been playing too much potentially in Shanghai and then win the title. So there is a flip side to it. I do think players need to take more responsibility though. Ultimately for that question, are we in agreement that not take more responsibility, but need to think about what works for them, as Joel said, and find that recipe and not let it be dictated to them by the tour?
I think the players are going to be naive to think that the tour is just going to magically shrink and accommodate them.
Off.
Exactly.
Yeah, tell that to my employer.
The structure is just not going to happen. So players need to kind of take it upon themselves and make it work. Make the tour work for them, because at the moment, I don't think the tour is working for the majority of players, and there's no kind of, it's not like the PTPA. There's no sort of union, I think, or embodiment that is going to create change immediately. So the best thing you can do is look out for yourself and your own team, and that starts, I think, with looking at your schedule. And I think the Holger Rune injury, I think, is going to be a sort of a rain check moment for a lot of the kind of players who play, I think, kind of relentlessly maybe on the tour, that hang on, I don't want to overdo it here, because from Rune's point of view, he's going to be missing a lot of tournaments, and it is so hard to kind of come back from the doldrums of a ranking in far down. It takes just kind of 6 months to just kind of get back to where you were. So is big kind of jeopardy and risk at play.
It's a warning. And Alina, I'll say one question for you. Do you think if players do start to play more sensibly with their schedule, that the ATP will have to listen, knowing that they're not going to get the top players at all of these tournaments? Is there hope if players do actually take it into their own hands?
I surely hope they're going to do so, because I feel like it's twofolded, and tournaments and the ATP tour is, I don't know, it just rewards this like grind mentality that I feel like it's so old school. I do hope that in the future I will see strategic players that think about, if not their bodies and schedules, of longevity. We do want to see them, having long careers. And I mean, if we look at the Williams sisters and even Stan, like the number of events they play per year is not that big. So there is a correlation there, at least, to be taken in consideration. So I do hope we see smarter
Interesting.
architects and
Yeah.
maybe a new position in the staff, in the player staff, like a
An
calendar designer.
ATP, like someone to take on the ATP, like a bouncer, to
Mm.
stop them coming near you. But that's a really good point. I do think it's almost like the more time you spend on court when you're younger, the less time you'll spend on when you're older. And I think there's probably a correlation if you think about that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see. But a very good question, listeners. If you've got a question for the mailbag, do get in touch with us.